Welcome to Madang Podcast. Today's special guest is Reverend Reyes-Chow, who is third-generation Filipino-Chinese American, hosts the podcast BRC and Friends, and has authored 5 books. Today, he is here on Madang Podcast to discuss the Spirit, Bible, Desmond Tutu, baptism, and his latest book, Everything Good About God is True, and so much more. Please stay tuned. Homeward Christianity's Theology Beer Camp tickets are now available. It will be held October 17 to 19 in Denver with fabulous speakers such as Diana Butler-Bass, Brian McLaren, Ilya Delio, and John Tatalamo, and so many more. Please go to www.theologybeer.camp to register. You can use discount code RETURNOFMADAM for $25 off registration. Please register today. God After Deconstruction's 10 30-minute videos looking at the top reasons people report for deconstructing their faith are now all available. In spring, there will be some live streams where Tom and Tripp answer questions about God after deconstruction. It is an easy resource for people to use by themselves or in a small group. Go to www.godafterdeconstruction.com. Broadleaf Books is excited to announce the publication of A Faith of Many Rooms, Inhabiting a More Spacious Christianity by Debbie Thomas. When your faith begins to feel too small, too confining, you can choose to leave it. But what if the faith we inhabit is roomier than we thought? Writing to those of us who feel confined by our faith, but who still long for God, Debbie Thomas combines her South Asian, immigrant, and feminist perspective to show us why there is room for her and us within the house of Christianity. To learn more, visit www.broadleafbooks.com. Enjoy a conversation with 2 authors and public theologians featured at the Festival of Homiletics. Meet others, share in light refreshments, and learn more about their 2 brand new books, Brian McLaren's Life After Doom, Grace Ji-Sun Kim's When God Became White. Meet us in Pittsburgh at Eastminster Presbyterian Church on 250 North Highland Avenue in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, on May 14th at 6:30.
For sponsorship inquiries, please email madangpodcast.gmail.com. This is Madang, an outdoor living room for guests to share their experiences and their work. I invite you to come in and stay for a while.
Welcome to Madang Podcast. Today's special guest is Reyes-Chow. He is a sought-after speaker and writer on topics of faith, culture, politics, race, and technology. He is an ordained minister in the Presbyterian Church USA and has led churches in the San Francisco Bay Area for nearly 3 decades and is a former moderator of the PCUSA. Reyes-Chow is a third-generation Filipino-Chinese American, hosts the podcast BRC and Friends, and has authored 5 books, most recently In Defense of Kindness. Today, he is on Madang Podcast to share his newest book, Everything Good About God is True. Shane Claiborne says, in this manifesto of love, my friend Reyes-Chow invites us all to acknowledge the damage that has been done in the name of Christ. But he also dares us to refuse to let the bad news be the only news. He challenges us to reclaim our faith. It is such a pleasure to have you back, Bruce, on Madame Podcast. So thank you so much for coming back.
It's good to be back. Though I hear when I said he's written 5 books, and then everybody who knows you it's like whatever.
No, still 5 is enormous.
I still every time I see, I'm like, another book. How is she right? Like, what is you are amazing? Is that they're all good, and so it's not as if you're like, AIing them or anything. Like you're actually how much stuff do you have in your head that just I mean, amazing. But anyway, that's the first thing I thought of. Was like 5, big deal, my friends.
No, that's a lot, especially if you're not in the academia. Like some of us
Yeah,
are expected, not, our school, there's no expectation, but other places.
yeah.
And for you to publish 5 books, that's quite amazing. So congratulations, especially on the last book. I love the cover. Now, everything
Yeah.
good about the
They apparently fought about it, and the publishers really fought about it, and
Oh, really?
the designer really, like,
Mhm.
the designer, uh, I guess, listened to, like, 10 of my sermons or something and
Uh-huh.
designed it and brought it
Oh.
back to the team, and they wanted it, I think, a little more churchy looking, and, he was like, "No, show him this one." Like, he's like, he's never fought for a cover as much. I was like, "Oh."
Oh,
He said,
wow.
"Show him this one. He'll like this one." And
Yeah.
they showed it to me, and I was like, "Ooh."
Yeah,
Like,
I really like it. It's
yeah,
sharp. It's like nothing out there, so
yeah,
it's very
yeah,
distinctive.
yeah, yeah,
Oh, it's great. So congratulations on this book. But before we get
yeah.
there, before we get to the book, I just wanted to talk about I think we're almost like twins because we both have 3 kids.
Mhm.
We're both ordained PCUSA. I think our birthdays are like a day apart, so we're both Taurus.
Oh my gosh, what are you yes, I'm early May. Are you early May as well?
I'm early May. I
Oh,
think you're
that's
May
right.
3rd.
I am May 3rd.
Yeah, I'm May 4th.
Oh my gosh, and my middle child is May 2nd, so I now have no
Oh,
birthday. The 2 of you just
but
have
I
just
don't know
taken
if we're
me.
the same year, and we don't have to discuss that on the podcast, but I think we're born in the same year.
Did landing on moons happen?
I don't even know when the
Oh,
landing
yeah.
happened, so I mean, you can't ask me that one. But
Terrible cultural references. Could be, could be.
what was that?
I said, terrible cultural references then for you. It's like, so did a major band break up that year?
That I
No,
wouldn't
no,
know
no.
either.
That's all I got. That's all I
Well
got. That's all I
well,
know
we'll
happened.
verify after the
Okay,
podcast
okay,
interview, but
sounds good.
I think we are born in the same year. We're a day apart. We're both Asian American.
That's
We're
so
both
funny.
PCUSA, and, we both published with Broadleaf. Yours, this one, and then mine's coming out, called Surviving God, so it's both Broadleaf, so I feel like we're like twins living
Yeah,
on the other side of the country.
that's awesome. I just heard this great thing, and they used to say, like, uh, sister from a brother, mister from another mister, or,
Yeah.
brother from another mother. Now the non-gendered one is
Uh-huh.
sibs from another crib. And it's
Uh-oh.
like I'm like, "Are sibs from the same crib?" I'm like, "I like that one." There we go.
I've never heard that one, but anyway,
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
yeah, I think we are, like,
I'll
siblings.
take
We're
it. I'll
twins.
take it. We'll
Yeah, we're
take it.
almost twins, yeah. So it's great to have you and, having another fellow PCUSA. I'm just thrilled that you wrote this very interesting book. And, I know before we get into the book, I wanted to, see if you wanted to share a little bit about your recent trip to Palestine. How did you go? Who went? And what
Sure.
happened? And
Yeah,
what are
I
your
could share that
plans?
really briefly. I was invited to go to be part of a delegation, that was invited by Sabeel in Palestine. It's a, Christian, liberation theology organization, as well as, Kairos Palestine. So really invited by, Palestinian Christians to come as a solidarity with the suffering delegation. So we really went, and we were one of the first non-diplomatic groups for them to bring back in and kind of meet with people. And we were unapologetically a group that was, pro-Palestinian, pro-ceasefire, certainly wanting what's happening in Gaza to end. But it was, very much a solidarity, trip. And I think, we met with about 20 groups. We went all the way in various parts, met with hostage families from Israel, a lot of secular Jews. Um, and we saw all the stuff that's happening. Those of you that know about what's going on, the demolition of homes has accelerated, displacement has accelerated. But I think the biggest takeaway that we received were, maybe 2 or 3, but one was it's eerily silent. I know you've been there, and, like, the marketplace there's always tension, but it's kinda buzzing and there's energy. It's eerie and quiet, and
Oh,
especially it's really very odd, and much of the reason is that folks, think that the West Bank is next, that if what's happened in Gaza has been able to not be controlled or stopped, and then what's going to stop the government from moving into what the West Bank. So that's one piece. The other part was that we met with a lot of folks, and they said the solidarity is great, but unless U.S. policy changes, doesn't really matter. And that was really powerful. And then the last, I think everybody was still very hopeful. They were telling us these terrible, tragic stories of losing their families and just living under occupation as we've heard these stories and they're kind of forced to tell them. But everybody said, but we're still hopeful. Things can change and we're not going anywhere. And so I came back, you know, convicted still and again, but also like if they can have hope when they really have every right not to, like how dare we not in anything? And so yeah, so I went there. I'm probably going to go back again and sometime soon to lead a delegation. So uh, until you go, you don't really get the depth of what's happening there, and it kind of changes your whole perspective. It's no longer an intellectual exercise as much when after you actually visit. So yeah, that it was powerful, and as you know from being there yourself. So
Oh,
yeah,
thanks so much for
mhm,
sharing about that
yeah,
because I was there just before the airstrike.
yeah.
No, I came back, October 5th or 6th,
Wow.
so it was, like, a bustling so busy, like,
Yeah,
tourists everywhere because that's, their biggest source of income, in Bethlehem and in other places.
yeah.
So, to hear that it's so silent and eerie
It
and
is.
yeah.
You could walk down those pathways and be the only person,
Wow.
but all the shops are still open because
Uh-huh.
what else are they gonna do?
Okay.
I mean, the desperation is just palpable, but it's act so strange because you just look down a whole one of those shop areas,
Mhm.
the alleyways, and nobody's there. It's
Wow.
yeah.
Well, I'm glad that you mentioned hope because when we were there, it was before the airstrike. But we talked about hope a lot. And the Palestinians have suffered so much, from the Nakba and you said about tearing down their homes. So that has been happening for a long time, losing land, losing their livelihood, losing their vineyards, and what other means of livelihood. But they all shared this hope, and that's we in the West, we sometimes are just so hopeless and feeling, this hopelessness, even as Christians, when the Bible's talking about holding on to peace and love and hope.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was really blown away by their sense of hope and talking about hope. But I'm really happy to hear that even after the airstrike, that they're still holding on to hope.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, very clear. Everybody ended with, "But we have hope." And we're like, "Okay, we're gonna if you can, yeah, how dare we not?" So, yeah, it was pretty powerful.
Wow. What can we do here?
Well, what I'm telling folks is to continue to listen to Palestinians who are reporting from the area, and, I just am shocked at the number of people that just don't believe that what's happening in Gaza is happening.
Yeah.
Like, it just I don't, and that's one. But I actually think what folks told us there is we have to change public opinion. As we know, until public opinion changes, politicians don't change, and then their votes don't change. You're starting to see a little bit come about. So I'm telling folks, show up. Like, at some point, you gotta show up, and either whether it's an action or whether it's speaking from your place of authority, you know, you're I tell folks, you're not the first person now. Like, you almost have no excuse. And I'm trying to be gentle with colleagues, but if you've said nothing at this point, I just think it's irresponsible. I mean, help your people figure out how to navigate this space and show up when folks are asking you to be on the streets, show up from their pulpits, show up just to continue to put the pressure on politicians and public leaders to change policy. And from here, that's I think all. And then I would say if you have the resources, give money to folks like Sabille and other people who are doing work on the ground there. If that's something that folks can do, give money, show up, and speak out when you can.
Hmm. Thank you so much,
Mhm.
Bruce, for your voice, your witness, and sharing so much of what you saw and experienced while you were there. And I'm glad that you're going back again. So thank you for
Mhm.
your work online and on the ground. I appreciate it so much, Bruce.
Thank you.
Yeah. So now let's turn to your book. As you said, the cover is very intriguing. Everything good about God is true. And if you don't have one, people should hurry up and order as you're listening to this podcast. You are such a lively, joyful human being in person. And sometimes that doesn't get translated into written work.
Yeah.
Like, but yours does. So, right
Oh,
from the
I thought you
beginning,
were gonna say, but it doesn't in the book. So I'm like,
no,
oh no.
no, I thought they were like when you're sharing your experiences and, your family, you're dating your wife, I just thought it was hilarious in
I
so
did
many.
have to ask permission from everybody before I had this really mushy love letter in there to my wife, and she's like, "Oh, good lord, are you really gonna put that in?" If she's like, "If it really makes sense," but then my editor's like, "It just doesn't make sense. Take it out." Like, "Okay."
But I thought it was funny, and you begin with, because you were the moderator of the Presbyterian Church USA, that's a big deal, and I don't think those outside the denomination or
Yeah.
those who don't go to church don't understand, so it's a big deal, and as your role, you were invited to different events and places, etcetera. So, in the beginning, you share the story with meeting this one too. Can you share with us the
Sure,
story?
yeah.
Because I
Uh,
was like, "This is so funny," and I need to hear it from from your mouth.
well, the best part
Fun
about
to
this
read
this may
about it.
this may be the only time that people get to hear this story because I was not chosen to do the audiobook. Apparently, most authors don't get to do their audio. I'm gonna be really jealous if you get to do your own audiobook, but, yeah, I had to submit an audition, and they're like, they didn't choose you?"
Oh, really?
Yeah,
No, they
it's happened to me
no,
twice now.
really. No, they actually offered, and then but this one, the one that's coming from Broadleaf, Susan didn't wanna do it, so then I
Oh,
said, "I'm
yeah,
gonna do it."
yeah.
But InterVarsity Press on the one, they said, "Can you do it?" And I said, "Well, have they heard my voice? Because I don't wanna start recording and then them rejecting me." And they said, "Yeah, they love your voice, it's fine." So
Whatever, I don't wanna hear about
no, 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 but then they said, "I have to go to New York to do it, it's too far." They won't allow me to do it where I
it.
live
Were you
somewhere.
home and with
They
you
don't
can say,
trust
I
me.
have a nice mic. I could swing."
No,
But,
they
yeah,
so I turned it down, but I was this close to recording one, but anyway,
I've
I'm
not
so
even been
sorry you
offered.
couldn't
But
record your
they chose the same Asian male to I've been rejected twice, and both times they chose the same guy independently. So, he's really good. I mean,
that
I
is
think it was
hilarious,
yeah, I think
but
it's
I
pretty good.
actually think it's the same Asian woman doing Surviving God and When God
That could
Became One.
be, that
She
could
was
be, yeah.
independently chosen, but I think it's the same person too.
There must be, like, the Asian male narrator, the Asian female narrator voice, which is fine, whatever. Yeah, I'm glad he's making his
I
money.
love your
That's
voice, I
okay.
can't believe they rejected you.
I know! People tell me that all the
You know
time.
what?
Like,
Your
you
voice is so much better than mine. Mine's a little scratchy, so I kept saying, "Are you sure they're gonna say it's okay? Because I don't wanna start doing it and then them reject it."
5 hours later, "Thank you very much." No, I know. People have always said, "You should do radio, you should do podcast,
Yeah.
you should do voiceover." So it's all it's very humbling for them to say, "Thank you, but no, we're gonna
No,
go with
thank you.
someone else," because, like, they don't care about my feelings, they wanna sell books. So I'm like, "Okay, well, if you don't feel like it'll work, who am I to challenge you to say, 'No, no, actually, my voice would be better.'" So anyway, the story you asked about that will only be heard on this podcast apparently. So yeah, so I got as moderator, yeah, it's very important to a very small group of people, right? Presbyterians, it is a big deal. And so I got to go. The best thing is I was elected moderator the year that Barack Obama was elected president.
Ah.
So I think I paved the way for him. I don't want to be too
Of course
arrogant
you
about that.
did.
Yeah. We're just getting ready. It's like this new generation. So again, this is like 15 years ago now. And so I got to go to the inauguration and actually be close. I didn't have a chair, but I was in the gallery of dignitaries that got to be close. And I got to
Wow.
go to multiple things. But one of them was the National Congressional Black Caucus worship service, which I will say that's probably been one of the most meaningful experiences, not just worship services I've ever been to, but so because all the dignitaries want to be at that one, like, especially in any African American traditions, but none of then us mainliners, we had a few in there as well, and so I got to go. Presbyterians, we don't wear all the vestments, so I just had my black robe on and I don't even have a stole on, and they line us up, and they line me up right behind, Archbishop Desmond Tutu, who is in full regalia. So it's like this like fortunately we're about the same height because he's a short guy. So like we're saying, but you could see everybody eyeballing me. Like who is this at this point, young Asian, like we don't know who that is. I was not involved in any of the national church things at all. And they're just like, and the best part was that, you know, Archbishop Des, as I like to call him, he turns to me and says, "Hey, how are you?" I'm like, "Oh my," like, and you're trying to be cool, like, just be cool. It's fine. It's just another person. And he just chatted with me like he was like we were regular people sitting on it was really beautiful because you hate to meet somebody and then they're not the person that
Yeah.
you yeah,
Mhm.
but he preached this sermon that was content, there was nothing to it, but he was so excited. He every, like, 2 minutes, he'd say, "United States is gonna have a black president." Like, and he would just say that. And then he'd talk a little bit more, say stuff, and then he'd be like, "Did you know?" And so he was lovely. I mean, it was just like, I hope like, there have been times where I've, probably got caught up in, like, I'm the speaker, I'm the talent, I like, and you just kinda move through the world, and you're like, "I gotta go to this next thing," and he just was, whatever, I'm just standing in line." While everybody else was I wanna get next to him. I
Yeah.
don't think we are quite at selfie as much selfie time at that point, but
Oh, that's too bad. So you don't have a
but I
selfie.
don't have a picture, no, I don't have a
Oh,
picture.
see, now we have to
You
question
have
whether
to
that actually happened.
well, but
You
if
know,
even if
if
I
it
showed a picture, people would question it these days, so,
that's true.
It'd be like zooming in. His hand is weird. That can't be his hand. Yeah.
The shirt's
Yeah,
disappearing.
yeah. Well, the funniest thing is people do that now. See my background that I'm this is like real. So these are real things. This is my background. But I have folks all the time zooming in to see what stuff is. So occasionally I'll switch stuff around just because like there you go. Anyway. People it's very interesting, isn't it? It's like,
It is, and when people have a bookshelf behind, I'm always zooming in, do they have my
what do they
book
have?
there?
I see you
No
happen
one
to be
does.
missing a book.
No
Uh-oh.
one no one has my
I
book.
just have mine. I just have mine. Yeah. So
So next time, Bruce, you gotta put my book behind you, okay? Because 'Cause I'm gonna get
usually when I'm interviewing people, I will actually put their book on the
oh,
thing.
okay.
So yeah,
Oh, okay.
there you go. That's funny.
Well, thanks for sharing that story
Yeah.
because, the worst thing is when you look up to somebody and you meet them and they're just so
They're jerks. Yeah.
yeah, and you're like, "Oh," and that has happened to me several times,
And
and
we both wanna not be that person.
yeah, I know, so I'm always careful. I better keep up my persona.
I'm kind of a jerk in my behind the scenes, but I'm gonna play nice right now. I'll be all chipper and funny for you now, but I'm really kind of an ass. So,
Anyway, you always crack me up. So anyway, thanks for sharing that
yeah.
story. I would have been blown away. I would have been so nervous to have met
Oh,
him.
I was totally nervous, but so I think he knows that, right? I mean,
Uh-huh.
he just is like, "Hey, how are you?" Like, "I'm fine, Archbishop Desmond Tutu."
Uh-huh.
So,
Anyway, I'm so glad you put that story in, and you have many other stories, so people have to go and read your book to find out some of these stories. And I was going to ask you how, with your especially with your family, but you got
mhm.
permission from all your
Yeah, and
family
my kids, it's really interesting. I think we've done a pretty good job at raising church kids that,
members.
they don't hate the church and they
Mhm.
understand that a lot of what I've been able to do and what they've been able to do is because of my life in this kind of ministry and profession. And
Mhm.
so they're at the point they're like, "So how many stories did I get in?" What it so unfortunately, it's like, well, Ev has to I think I mentioned you once. Like, they're like, "What?" I'm sure I must have some stories that could make your next book. Like, okay. Some children hate it when their parents talk about them, but my kids are like, "We want fair play." Like,
Oh,
my
wow.
kids are all equal labor people too, so they're like, "We" yeah.
Oh, that's so good because I write about a lot of people. I don't know if I write about my kids, though. Maybe I did once or twice, but I can't remember now, but but your stories are so good and it fits so well. And when I look at the outline of your book, I don't know if you had that in mind, but it felt so Trinitarian. Did you have that in mind when you
Well, it did, but I don't, so because, you look at scripture and it's something we draw from it, so it's not as if we can say, here's the only way to think about our understanding of the holy and of God. So I certainly grew up in a Trinitarian, world. So I have a couple of lines that talk about, like, I'm not saying this is the only way to think about it, but this is the way that for generations had made sense to lay things out, and so I do. So yeah. So I wrote the montage first, the statement first, and that's how Broadleaf was drawn into it. And I had thought about this before. I'm like, I think this could be a book, and I've always wanted to write a book that I could hand somebody that was new to the church and say, here's a
Mm,
place to start, and you can start anywhere actually. But if you have almost any question that you would have about the church, here something's going to be in here, and then that'll prompt us to talk. And you don't have to give any disclaimers for this one. You don't have to say, well, it's an academic book. This was somebody's dissertation, and they turned it into a book. So I hope that you can just hand it to almost anyone, and it'll draw people into these conversations. And so the structure was very thought out as a way to kind of go through the whole rhythm and life of faith and church life.
wow, that's amazing because sometimes I don't put much thought into it when I start my book, but you had this whole plan, so that's amazing.
And I this one went I was telling somebody, like, well, I think I've been working on it for about 3 years. And then
Mhm.
during publishing date, last week, 2 weeks, I don't even know how long ago. I emailed my editor and just to thank her for her work. And it's funny, we both emailed each other within the hour. And I looked back, and the first email of her approaching me was only 18 months ago.
Mm.
And I was like, it feels like 3 years.
Mhm. Yeah.
But
Oh,
I already had it structured out, and I had
wow.
much of it written. But yeah, so yeah, I had thought this would be a really good kind of way to begin to think about a version of faith. So
Mm.
yeah.
Yeah, I think it's an important book for the church, and I know you're doing a lot of church book talks.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah, so that's
people are using it. I've been hearing from multiple folks that are using it for Lent as a Lenten devotional kind of thing. Few sermon series. The thing I've loved the most to hear is there's a section at the beginning about to challenge us to claim the title theologian, that we're all theologians.
mhm.
And one church is using that as their children's focus. So
Oh,
to have their children's ministry focus on we are theologians, and to have them begin to learn about what it means for them to claim the space to be able to talk about God and who God is, and really use that. That's so far been the loveliest thing I've heard about how churches are beginning to use it.
so is it, mostly Presbyterians or across gen
I would say mostly Presbyterians, but I have connections to the UCCs and some Lutherans, and so I know that there's a few congregations I've heard about. So far, the book has done really well. It's in its second print already, and
What?
I know.
Wow,
Yeah,
congratulations.
like, they're very excited about this, so I'm like, okay, yeah. So we've hit some markers already early on. So I think they're like I joke with my family like it's already a classic, but no, I'm hoping that it sticks around. They did it in paperback because their idea is that it's going to have a higher back order rate, like it's going to be able to last longer. And so didn't do hardcover. That
Mhm.
it really is going to be one that buy in bulk. So there's been a lot of bulk buys and folks thinking, and I hope that's only going to increase. I'm getting invitations that come out to places in the fall because they're going to use it as their fall kickoff study or something.
Wow.
So I'm really excited about it. I just, in the midst of everything in the world going on, books are kind of meaningless in a scheme of like some
Yeah.
things, but at the same time, I'm really proud of this project. Really excited about it, and can't wait to really focus on it, over the next months to get it into people's hands.
Wow, congratulations on second
Yep.
print. That is very
I know.
fast.
I was like, well, I had to ask him, like, is that good? And like, yes, that's good. I'm like,
Oh,
okay.
no, that's fabulous.
I'm just waiting for them to tell me you've earned out your advance too. I'm like that.
Oh.
Let me know when that happens. Then I could be like, okay, we're good now. Now we're not losing money.
Well, I'm sure you will soon.
I hope
If it's
so.
selling that well and you've already been invited throughout the year, that's amazing. So, congratulations. You write in the book, which I thought was kind of interesting. You wrote, it's actually quite inconvenient to believe in God. I commit to a life worthy of this God in whom we have chosen to believe. So, can you share with us why is
Yeah.
quite
Well, I mean,
inconvenient?
I've been preaching a lot on what's inconvenient about faith to me. So I'm preaching, I used one passage about the fisher folk following Jesus and into a good place, but not a convenient place or not a comfortable place. And then I just picked something out of the Bible about what's something that I really wish Jesus didn't ask me to do. Like the world would be easier if Jesus didn't say, you should probably forgive people. You should probably feed people when they're hungry. You should probably visit people in prison. Like all these things that really, if it were just left to me, I use an image of like I would sit all day and stare into the eyes of my dog and just let her tell me the world is okay. And I would just like that'd be fine. And but yet, if we take it seriously, Jesus calls us into these spaces. And recently it's been um, the faith calling into don't repay evil acts with evil acts and
Mhm,
bless those who curse you, and how difficult that is in the midst of our political climate. But yet, that's clear. Like it's easy to bless and pray for people you love or agree with you, but those who don't and curse you, like I don't want to do that. But if we choose to follow, then we really have to, and that's it. So that's the important part of this book to me is that choosing faith subtitle is really, every morning, just like if you decide to be anti-racist or to fight misogyny or to fight homophobia, whatever you're deciding you're going to be different about, it just doesn't happen. You have to wake up every day, and it's exhausting, and that's why people don't do it. I mean, I just think if it were easy, we would all do it, but people make conscious and subconscious choices not to do it and not to choose that, and so some of us need to choose it more. So
mm.
not convenient at all. It is not profitable. It is not.
That's true.
It's just yeah. It's a pain in the ass basically to follow. But yet here we are. Like, I wouldn't. I
If it
wouldn't.
is so inconvenient, what keeps you going?
So the spoiler alert for the book is that I believe in the bodily resurrection of Jesus Christ, and that there is this, people I get there and people are like, really, you're this liberal progressive person and you actually believe this? Like, what is going on? And I because I the world is so terrible
Mhm. Yeah.
that I have to believe in something that is beyond my imagination. I just and so I believe it, and if I believe that to be true, how
Mhm.
can I not respond to that act and that reality with grace and gratitude and just like, well, if this is true and I have this eternal life with God and oh my gosh, this happened, how can I not live differently?
Mm,
Like it just feels like it doesn't honor what God has done in the world and in my life now and eternally, which I think translates to for many of us who understand kind of ancestral honor. It's kind of the same thing. These folks who came before me, while the world is terrible, how much more terrible it would be if they didn't do the work that they did.
mm,
And so I'm going to honor that work that they're doing in the same way that it brought me to where I am, so that my descendants can look back and say their ancestors actually did good work in the world and they're going to live as if that matters. So I think it's this combination of this ancestral honor and honor to what God has done. That like I have no choice but to try to live better and make the world a better place. So, and I've always that's been passed down to me. I've chosen it, um, and continue, even though again, super inconvenient.
mhm. Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. And your book is about God. And you do write how God gives us agency.
Mhm.
So these days I'm really thinking deeply about God and God's action and God's presence. So share with us what it really means when God
Yeah.
gives us agency. You said, and we get to seek out particular communities that feed us and bring us joy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Share
So
with
I challenge this idea. We throw around these things all the time in church. Those of you that attend church, or you're like two things we throw around all the time. This kind of substitutionary atonement theory, like it's in all of our hymns, and we just kind of say, you know, God gave God's child for us, and like okay, and we're all okay with this sacrificial parent. That's one. But the other one that we always talk about is there is this plan that God has. And we default to this like everything is planned out. Like every action, everything that happens, God is doing it, as opposed to God is present in everything. And so I try to challenge the idea about what God's plan is. And I believe there's a plan, but the plan is how God collaborates with our choices in with God's intentions. And so that nothing, like I'm perfectly fine saying also some crappy things just happen and some beautiful things just happen. And our job is to figure out how God and God's intentions and hopes and our agency to choose how we live when those align. And that's where God's plans become revealed to us, is that that's the place to figure out how do we co-collaborate with God. God has hopes and intentions for us and invites us into that. And we can choose to join in that or choose not to. And I think that's where I want to take away from this idea that God has planned everything, that's God's plan, as opposed to God's plan is this revealing that happens with us that
Mhm.
is much more freeing to me. And it's not as problematic. It just makes more sense that not everything is this cause and effect. There is like some again, terrible things happen. And the worst thing we can say to somebody who's gone through trauma is, well, it's all part of God's plan. Because ultimately that's what we're saying. And I'm like, I don't buy that. That's not the God I believe in. And so and I try to lay it out in a way that folks have a very accessible, concrete understanding of here's another option to think about God's plan. And I think we've done a pretty good job. My editor is amazing. And so I think we've done a really good job at kind of laying these really complex, deep theological, I think, misguided theology into some really accessible ways to rethink um, same language and kind of what is next.
Yeah, your book is really accessible, so no doubt about that. So it's very clear. And after you talk about God, you're also speaking about the Spirit,
Mhm.
and you write about how the Spirit often moves on the least expected individuals and communities. Essential to the work of the Spirit is the element of surprise. So how does all that tie in, the Spirit and God, and how we are to live in this world?
Yeah, I just always feel people should always remain open to possibility. And that doesn't abdicate our responsibility to commitments that we've made and, plans we might have. And, some people kind of zip off a little bit too soon. I mean, there's all kinds of things. But I do think sometimes we are so tied to what we think should happen that we lose out on opportunities that may pass us by. I think of the spirit in a couple ways. One, it kind of swoops in when we least expect the spirit. I also, it kind of lights a fire under our ass sometimes. Like it's like, okay, let's like just go. You're feeling it, like now go. Like I just feel like sometimes the spirit is like, that this thing is wrong, and you may not want to go protest, but you know what? You need to go. Like this is the time. So I think there's a lot of ways the spirit moves us, but that surprise element is one that I just I don't want to wait a year and then look back and go like, oh, look at what the spirit did. I actually want to be more present than that and to like, oh, huh, wonder what that means and be able to sit with something more in the moment in real time. Be like, I wonder, is there a nudge somewhere else? Is there and maybe there isn't, but just to give ourselves room and space to actually take a pause when the world is moving so quickly and we all move so quickly and, productivity is rules, that we let ourselves just be like, huh, I wonder what that was. Hmm. And that's good and bad, right? Sometimes I'll do something or I'll see something or I'll think something. I'm like, huh, where did that come from? That wasn't good. And I think that's all the spirit, like allowing us to shift and change our own behaviors.
That's so beautiful. Thank you for that. Your book also talks about Bible. I grew up with the Bible. My mother would say you can't put anything on top of the Bible. She
Oh,
was very strict about what you can do and how you carry the Bible and how we need to read the Bible. So, that's the upbringing I had as a Christian. So
yep.
here you're talking about how it operates as a living guidebook for
Mhm.
our lives.
Yep.
So if you could share a little bit about how
Yeah.
you see scripture guiding your life and how it can guide our lives. Because some
Right.
people have this love-hate relationship
Oh,
with
sure.
the
And
Bible. Yeah.
with all justified reason. The Bible has
Uh-huh.
been weaponized, as you know. I mean, just
Yeah.
terrible. It's just, So my
Even
thing
what's
around
happening in Gaza right now.
oh,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, it's just oh my gosh, there's just so much. So there's a couple things. We don't worship the Bible. That's not. I mean, I grew up in a church that like it was a progressive church before I knew what progressive was. Right. I didn't know until I went somewhere else, and they're like, "Oh, you're at a progressive church." I'm like, "Well, okay, it's just church to me, but whatever you need to call it." And I've actually never had much experience with conservative evangelical, whatever we want to call that world. I actually not in college, not in any of my upbringing. So I've had what we mainline progressives would like to have everybody experience. It's very healthy, loving, not perfect, obviously, but just like full, experience. And so the Bible for me has always been looked at as this living, constantly revealing, holy document. And I've been raised and believe that there is inherent truth in it, but it's not literal. And to hold that intention, right? We get God's truth as spoken to humans and written down and recorded. Like believing that it's not the literal word of God doesn't take away its the truth of what it can reveal. And part of understanding truth is understanding humans' place in it, right? So that we know, I mean, documents were transcribed and things were messed up and there's stuff that's gone in there that shouldn't be and whole lines missing, all the things. And so I've always been like, one, you can always find something in the Bible to back up any position you want. So let's just like, and we all proof text. Like I just like this. We just
Yeah.
own the fact, like we all do it. So then now where we're left? We're left with struggling to figure out what does it mean for our lives. And that is, I think, ultimately what it is. And the other part is like I just feel like it is our primary source, but there are so many other texts as well that can help inform that just happen to not get into the canon, the gospel according to Mary and the Didache, and there's like other things that inform faith. And so I don't lower it. I don't worship the Bible. It guides me. It's a revealing of human story. It's a conversation, and I think it includes and conveys the truth of God. Now, some people then go, "So you think it's literal?" Again, and I'm like, "No, but I don't have to think it's literal to think like expand your understanding of what
Yeah.
truth can mean." So that's
Mhm.
what I try to do. I try to get permission for people to just say, "Well, I don't believe that," or "I think this is wrong," and that's fine, right? Because there's
And are
stuff in
you
the
getting
Bible.
uh-huh.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say, do you get any pushback when you speak about that in the church, or it's been
I
okay?
have, it's interesting. I have got very little pushback so far, but it's coming. But it's interesting. The thing that I get most pushback,
Uh-huh.
you probably know this, right? People don't read what you actually say; they just want to say something about what you think.
Yeah.
Right? So I get atheists that will come and say, "Well, your God, da da da." And I'm like, "Well, if you read the book, that's not my God." Like, yeah, I totally agree with you. That God sucks. Like, yeah, like if that's like, but so I will say to some like, well, I get that you think that's the main narrative of Christianity because they basically control the narrative, but that's not what I'm talking about. Like, I don't believe in the God that you just described. So you could not hate you could hate Christianity. I totally get that. But you can't come and critique me for something that I have never said I believe. So that's really what's happening now is that, well, what all the bad things that God does? I'm like, well, I just don't believe that God does bad things and good is contextual.
Uh-huh.
So yeah, I mean, if you think it's bad, then that we can talk about, but I don't think they're like the vengeful God is not something that I'm particularly interested in trying to defend. So, you know.
Mhm.
Anyway, so but very little other pushback. It's been mostly very kind of opening up for people a little suspicious about any claim to write a book on Christianity. I mean, it's kind of an audacious task when people say, "Well, what it's about?" I'm like, "Christianity." Like, wasn't there already a really big book written about that called the Bible? Then mine's more accessible.
It is very accessible. And, as an Asian American, for me, growing up, I was really embarrassed about my food, like Korean food.
Mhm.
But now it's like, I can't wait to eat Korean
Oh,
food.
yeah. Me
I
too.
want, yeah, and I watch K-drama, and I think about 25% or more of the scenes are eating or talking about what they're going
Oh, yeah, I know.
to eat.
It's so funny. It's like, "Do you have to tell us what you're gonna go eat every time?"
And, and we always the Korean language, we say something delicious. And we don't get that here in the Western world. It's like, okay, let's go eat. And it doesn't have to be delicious. It's just like, okay, let's go eat.
Right.
In Korean, it's always about, oh, I want to eat some, I'll buy you something delicious to celebrate X, Y, and Z and all that. So, this food is very, very important. And one day I said, I'm going to write about food. But
Oh,
here in this book on chapter 15, it's called Fed. So
yeah.
I was like thrilled to read that chapter. And you're talking about every Lunar New Year, your family would get together and
Yeah.
prepare the table, your family around. There's hustle and bustle and fighting for positions around the table. So I just love that imagery.
Yeah.
So share with us what it means to be fed. Why did you include this in your book? I'm so pleased that you did.
Yeah.
But for non-Asians, they were thinking, well, what's the big deal? But for us
Yeah.
Asian Americans,
I think
food
it's
is
very
everything.
yeah, I love food. I mean, when I eat by myself, if anybody follows me on Instagram, there was something like, okay, you can calm down with the food. But like I plate stuff for me.
Oh, you do?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. My wife's like, all right, that's for you. And I'm like, yeah, it has to look beautiful for me. Like I want like so my sandwiches are always like done up and it's just for me. It's not even just like I'm putting it out for everybody to see. I'm like, I love the preparation of food as well as the eating of it, putting it in my pile. So, so I always have loved that and plug to a book that Broadleaf also published called Just oh, I just like the name Just Faith, Just Food. Derek Weston and Ann Wolfenden, really good, excellent. Page 84 has this amazing Filipino chicken adobo recipe that I wrote. In any case, but yeah, I so one of the things about this book that I really tried to do was to not have it be clearly like, okay, here's the part about his ethnicity. Here's the part about justice. Here's the part about because my faith, and I think many people, all of those things are actually just woven throughout. And it drives me just batty when it's like, here's Jesus, and now here's justice,
Oh,
as if you could separate those two and so as if my faith and now here's my Asian American part, like as if I could separate those two. And so that story is just my lived experience of what it means to be around a table and be fed. And it translates for a lot of people, right? Like when a lot of families gather, there is this, but have never recognized it as maybe this holy moment.
uh-huh.
And I'm a big fan of weekly communion because I
Oh,
think it is one of the only times that we are really invited to just bring everything to the table. I think there was a long time theologically we would say you leave everything aside and you just come to the table. And I think many of us have shifted like, no, you bring everything to the table and God holds it all. We hold it together there and then we're fed by that. And that's this whole idea about everybody coming to the place. And that's why weekly communion for me is one of those rites and rituals that have very few in the world and for the world being so exhausting right now, that moment of gathering and just saying, if you can't hold it, somebody will hold it for you, but bring everything here is just powerful for me. And that I mean, a lot of these things were, all going to have to be in baptism the same way. All of the things that people would have questions about the church and faith, it's in the book, and that's an important part of it.
oh, thank you so much. I think time is almost up. There is so much in this book that we can discuss. You have a great chapter about Jesus, prophet, pastor, priest, and poet. You cover sacraments, baptism. I think baptism, for those who are curious, I think they should read this because
Yeah.
some people, like Quakers, they don't do baptism. And
It's fascinating because my editor, like,
uh-huh.
I think baptism I do into like 2,000 words. Everything from what does it mean theologically to why do some people get baptized and does it even matter? And my editor was that we worked on that a long time. She said, well, okay, so if I'm reading this, I've not been baptized. What does it say to me? Like, how do you make like, oh, that baptism chapter, we really kind of nurtured and wrestled with that one a lot because it's such a central unique thing, and, so I'm glad you brought that up. Yeah, that I love that little section.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
it's an important one, and even within the PCUSA, people question, oh,
Mhm.
adult baptism and
Yep.
infant baptism. So across denomination, people are
Yep.
wondering about baptism. So I thought that was helpful. And you do the sacraments that you kind of mentioned, and you end with a faith montage, which I thought was so beautiful. So you don't need to share it because I want people to go out and buy your
Go
book.
buy it and then leave
Yeah, so we
reviews.
can go into the 3rd and 4th printing, which is unbelievable. So Everything Good About God is True. It's published by Broadleaf Books. So go out and get this book. And, as authors, we always want reviews. So if you've read it, please review it and give it a star 5 on Amazon.
Yes, if you're gonna give 3 stars, go do something else, don't do it.
You're
I'm
so,
like,
you're not going to.
I am blatant when I go to meet with groups, I'm like, "You know what? 4s and 5s, great. If you're gonna do a 3, leave it on someone else's." Like, I just it's fine. It's fine. I'm waiting, you know what I want? I'm waiting for that first one that's because they just hate me theologically, and I'll leave those. Those are
And you probably
fine.
didn't read it
And they
anyways.
probably didn't read it anyway, exactly,
Yeah.
but I'm like, "Heretic, apostate." I'm like, "Yeah, I gotta have some of those." But, yeah, Goodreads and Amazon, even if you didn't buy it from Amazon, those
Yeah,
reviews are
you can
great. I
still,
mean, yeah.
yeah.
So,
So, yeah, and I hope many more churches will continue to use it. It's great that you're booked out to the fall. I hope that next year, Lent, people can use it. And I think it's a good book throughout the year. I think when members join the church, it's a good book to kind of read to see, who and, why am I practicing this?
well,
And
the one interesting thing is I actually have heard a lot of people almost like, "I didn't actually know what this meant, but it's too late to ask." Right? They've been or
yeah,
there's
oh,
something
they've
they're
already
like,
been, okay,
yeah,
yeah, they've
and
already
they're
been
like,
at the
I'm what like, you don't have to put a brown paper bag around it. You can read it in public. But it's almost like, "Oh, okay, I was always wondering why this felt weird, and
Uh-huh,
now here it is." But so it's been an interesting like, who is it for? People have asked. I'm like, "Well, it could be people post deconstruction.
uh-huh.
It also could be for people who've been deep in the pews for a long time, and
Yeah,
we've
that's
never
true.
really explained stuff, and we're terrible at that."
Yeah.
And then it's for brand new people.
Yeah.
So, it could
And for those who've been in the pews for a long time, some of us don't want to ask the questions,
Mhm, exactly.
the sacraments and baptism and all that. So I think it's a great book. And I'm just so thrilled that I'm friends with you and that we're
Oh,
almost twins.
likewise, and almost yeah, sibs from the same crib. That's what it
Yeah,
is. There
okay,
we go.
I have to remember that Sims from the same crib. So thank you so much, Reverend Bruce Reyes-Chow, for being on Madang Podcast and for writing this book and sharing it here on Madang Podcast. Thank you so much.
Great. Thanks for having me.
Homebird Christianity's Theology Beer Camp tickets are now available. It will be held October 17 to 19 in Denver with fabulous speakers such as Diana Butler Bass, Brian McLaren, Ilya Delio, and John Tatalamo, and so many more. Please go to www.theologybeer.camp to register. You can use discount code Return of Madame for $25 off registration. Please register today. God After Deconstruction's 10 30-minute videos looking at the top reasons people report for deconstructing their faith are now all available. In spring, there will be some live streams where Tom and Tripp answer questions about God after deconstruction. It is an easy resource for people to use by themselves or in a small group. Go to www.godafterdeconstruction.com. Broadleaf Books is excited to announce the publication of A Faith of Many Rooms, Inhabiting a More Spacious Christianity by Debbie Thomas. When your faith begins to feel too small, too confining, you can choose to leave it. But what if the faith we inhabit is roomier than we thought? Writing to those of us who feel confined by our faith, but who still long for God, Debbie Thomas combines her South Asian, immigrant, and feminist perspective to show us why there is room for her and us within the house of Christianity. To learn more, visit www.broadleafbooks.com. Enjoy a conversation with two authors and public theologians featured at the Festival of Homiletics. Meet others, share in light refreshments, and learn more about their two brand new books, Brian McLaren's Life After Doom, Grace Jisan Kim's When God Became White. Meet us in Pittsburgh at Eastminster Presbyterian Church on 250 North Highland Avenue in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania on May 14th at 6:30.
For sponsorship inquiries, please email madangpodcast.gmail.com.